So I am here today with a very distinguished guest. His name is Karl Dewazien. Did I get that right, sir?
Any way you pronounce is going to be correct.
Okay. Coach Karl, give you a little background, is a soccer coach, but he works primarily currently with children and developing what I consider a fundamental, pardon the pun, that's part of his company's name, but he develops the groundwork for which athletic talent can be properly utilized later on in life. Have I got that right?
Well, I would hope so.
Give me a bit of a background, Karl, Coach Karl.
Okay, Joseph, I'll make it really quick because if I start talking about my background, we'll be in here for an hour. But let me give you two of the highlights. One of them is I was the state director of coaching for the California Youth Soccer Association, and I was able to serve the children from 1978 until 2012. Okay. I also have published 8 books on soccer. One of them was translated into and distributed in China, another one in Japan, and another one in the Spanish-speaking countries. And the focus has always been to try to create the love of the game in the child so that they play it for a lifetime rather than what they're doing right now, which is playing it up until they're teenagers. And when it's their decision to either play or not, they quit, and they're often not too active.
Right. I think that's really critical. I mean, you touched on a key word, the love of the game. And I would say I would probably take it maybe a little further if you don't mind, the love of sport and the love of just being healthy. And I think that's really critical as opposed to trying to mold the athlete or, the child into potential Maradona or something like that, which, could possibly happen. But the reality is not everybody's going to make it at that level, but they have a love of health and fitness. Correct?
Exactly. And the bottom line is we need to make sure that these children actually are taught how to play, because today it seems like everything's controlled by adults, and we have a tendency to make them dependent on us in order to just go out and play. And hopefully during this discussion, I'll be able to get some ideas across to you and your listeners as to how we need to teach the children to actually play on their own, because nowadays they don't.
Right. And you had a very a soft spot for me, and the word is play. And I remember taking a course, and I mentioned this in an earlier podcast, and it was one of my profs, Joe Levy. And at that time at university, I needed to boost up my GPA to stay in the phys ed program. So I said, I'll take this one course here called Theories of Play. How hard can it be? It was an essay every week almost. But I ended up doing well in it. And I really had a really nice interaction with Professor Levy. And one of the 3 things I kind of learned, and I always forget the third one's probably the reason why I got a B+, but it's suspension of reality and internal locus of control. So give me your definition of play.
Well, I'm not too sure if there's a definition for play, but it's the idea of a child doing what they're comfortable with and what they understand. I find that right now, what we do, as a matter of fact, if you take a look at the word play or player, the kids are telling you why they're coming to practice. They're not coming to practice to improve and do the other things that adults expect them to do. They come to play the sport. So I don't care if it's ice hockey or if it's basketball or whatever it might be. And we as adults take that away from them by trying to teach them the sport rather than allowing them to play. They should be playing the sport itself in order to learn how to play the sport on their own. And that's the bottom line. We make them dependent. So let me give you just a quick example.
Sure. Go ahead.
Do you coach soccer, by the way?
I've worked with kids, yeah. Worked with a soccer team and stuff. The youngest I ever worked with was the U14.
Okay, so you have U14s coming out. Did you lay out the cones for them?
No.
Lay out the environment?
No, I wasn't in charge of that. I was more about just kind of getting them how to run properly.
Okay, so if you came to the practice and you had a head coach, was everything laid out for the players? Were they flags out, cones out, and everything else?
Pretty much so, yes.
Okay, so what we're teaching right now is the kids, especially here in the United States, I don't know how it is in Canada, but the children come to the playground and everything is laid out for them. And what we're teaching them is you can't play unless there's an adult that lays the environment out for you. So now when they go home, what do the kids do? They start playing computers and everything else because they haven't been taught how to lay out their own environment. So the first thing that I try to teach coaches is to teach the child to become independent, and that means to teach them how to lay out the environment. As an example, let's say that I have two cones, and Joseph, you're on one, you're my friend, and I'm the other person, and I put my feet together, and I go to the right side as far as I can with my foot, and I lay down a cone. I bring my feet back together. I go to the left side. I lay down a cone. What have I just created?
You've created basically a game, basically your own game.
Well, I've laid down a cone here. I've laid down a cone here. So there's two cones laying on the side. What boundaries? How about a goal?
There you go.
Okay, so now if I asked you to take 10 steps in the opposite direction and do the same thing that I just did. Feet together, right side, put down a cone, left side, put down a cone. What have you just created?
Soccer field, basically.
Exactly, a 1-against-1 soccer game. But what do? We lay these things out for the children when they go. Well, let me ask you this. Can a 4, 5, 6-year-old stretch to the right and to the left and lay down cones?
Pretty tough, but yeah, you can do it. They can do it, I think.
Okay, pretty tough, right? So in other words, we don't expect them to be able to do it, so we don't teach them.
Smart.
But if you're patient, do you think they'll eventually learn it?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, well, I know so because I have a 4-year-old granddaughter. It took her 3 tries and she was able to do it on her own, lay out a goal, laid out my goal, and then we started playing 1-against-1.
Right. Wow, that must be exciting. You know what? You hit a little point here, and the idea of sort of everything being laid out for them versus when they come home and then they go back in computer games. What I think, one of the elements that Dr. Levy kind of pointed out to me was this idea of internal locus of control, and what that meant was basically, if we can sum it up, was the idea of stretching the mind, where basically the child basically starts to develop their own borders, but you're giving them permission in one sense to do that, and they basically now, so that the mechanism of doing that, I think what you're doing in a nutshell, I could be wrong, but you're fostering imagination.
Well, not just that, what you're doing is you're creating habits.
Yes.
Have you ever had a teenager in the house?
No. I've had my nieces and nephews, yeah.
Okay, well, have you asked their parents about how clean their rooms are?
Thank you very much.
Well, why aren't their rooms clean?
Creating boundaries.
Well, you have to remember that nobody taught them how that room should look in order for it to be clean. So the end result is mom goes in, cleans it up for them, and it's the same thing in sports. We do everything for the child, so eventually they can't depend on themselves to do those things on their own. Right.
And so, it's really interesting. I think people fail to realize that play in a broader sense, especially with sport. Sport is sort of, for me, it allows you to kind of, I would say misbehave, but basically interact in ways that you would normally not interact otherwise. And I think in certain environments, certain sports, I mean, in the bad side, for example, hockey, for example, I mean, there's fighting in hockey. If you did that in public, let's just say you would be, different story. But if you did in hockey, it's 2 minutes in the penalty box. So there's certain things that we allow in society that maybe up here, anyways, Canada's a little different in some ways. In some countries it's really frowned upon, which probably is a good thing. But sport to me kind of allows that to happen. And then, like you said, when you start to kind of preset all these things, you're taking away this sort of ability to sort of experiment with your personality, with other people, and through that interaction, you learn character, you learn discipline. It's a way of sort of allowing you without having the formal repercussions. As if, for example, you fought in, let's say, in hockey. I'm bringing up hockey here, but after the game, you shake hands and that's it. You did that in public, it would be a different story. People, the police would be involved, right? So it's kind of a interesting dichotomy here.
Well, it's also the same thing, leadership, right? If the child is constantly, or the player is constantly dependent on the coach to decide for them what's going to happen in the game, what happens during the game. I mean, in soccer, it's horrendous. We're yelling and screaming at them all the time, and they don't have the ability to just focus and try to figure out, do I listen to somebody on the sidelines and follow their instructions, or do I play the game? Where's my concentration? So let's take, for example, a younger child. What are they taught as soon as they hear their name? Well, not only that, the parent is on the sideline and they're a distance away. In order for their child to hear them, what do they have to do to get their attention?
You got to yell them. Yell.
You have to yell at them. Now at home, if you yell their name, what does that mean usually?
Exactly.
Okay, so here you've got a child on the field. The parent yells his name, and the child goes, look, and listen. Well, in our game, that ball doesn't stand still, and nobody stops to figure out what the mom and dad are going to be saying and how to apply it. Okay, by the time they look back, the game's already changed. So just starting there, the leadership portion of it is we need to be able to have that child feel confident enough to be able to just concentrate on the game.
It's funny. If you ever get a hold of this, it'd be interesting. I like to listen to your take on it. There was a National Film Board movie, and I remember watching this in grade school. It was a split screen, and one screen was a bunch of kids getting together in the neighborhood and playing baseball, pickup baseball. The other one was the same age, roughly, but it was very formalized. It was like, you had teams, uniforms, you had parents in the stands doing what they're doing, good or bad. And then, what you saw at the beginning was, you had this formal, everybody was on one team, the other person on that team. The other split screen, all these kids just put their gloves in a pile, and there was one guy just basically was just dishing left and right what the teams were. And it turned out one side was completely stacked, and they were just getting killed. The other side just killing them. But in the end, this is really interesting. In the end, what happened was they said, okay, last run wins. And guess who scored the last run? It was a team that was getting killed. And the next day, they played again. And it was no mention of the previous loss or, it was just free flow. And then the other side, oh my God, it was chaos. So, and I remember just growing up, I never was involved in formal sports as a kid because my parents couldn't afford it. So maybe it was a good thing. I don't know. But we came here as immigrants, and my dad worked a lot. My mom worked a lot too. So there's nobody really to haul your butt around from sport to sport. So we just played with the kids in the neighborhood, and we played. Everybody was sort of in the same sort of boat with their parents, and so everybody kind of just played. And we played hockey in the wintertime. We played football, baseball, soccer in the summertime. It was basically whoever had the equipment at the time who wasn't who was willing to give it up. Like, so some guy had the ball, nobody else had the ball, and so you had to go and knock on his door and say, hey, can we borrow your ball, or something like that. Or then somebody got a ball, and that was in the two balls now. Basically, so we had a little bit more leeway in terms of can we play soccer that day. And we never had that. I look at some of the kids that I work with and their parents, right? The formality that's required now at a very young age. It just kind of boggles my mind because I'm thinking, well, hold on here. We played every sport known to man pretty well. And we made some of these things up. We made the rules up as we went based on the team that we, that was sort of getting killed, or, okay, you can't do this, even though the rule book says this, but you can do this, can't do that. And so this idea of play to me was really formalized. And I think I learned to grow up in a very healthy sort of environment. And I truly believe that And again, I'd like to hear your take on it. I think that sort of helped me with my ability to think later on for cognitive abilities. And I know from a lady by the name of, she's actually from California. Her name is Dr. Carla Hunnifer. And she has this whole thing on brain gym and the idea of play and whatnot. The idea is that certain movement patterns are akin to developing different parts of the brain. And when you eliminate some of these movement patterns, that the child actually has cognitive impairment later on. So I'm just, what's your take? Well, I mean, if you want to add to that, I'd love to hear your opinion.
Well, all you need to do is just take a look at the top players in any sport. Where did all of them start? Did they start in their neighborhoods, or did they start getting coached at 6, 7, and 8 years old?
I agree. Point taken.
All the top players, I don't care who it is, from Michael Jordan to Messi, they all were kids that played in their neighborhoods. My question to the adults is, by the way, did you play basketball by any chance? Another sport you didn't play, huh?
Myself?
Yes.
Oh, we played a little bit, but not much because there were no hoops in our neighborhood. But
okay.
If we had it, we would be playing it.
All right, but let's say that you had a hoop in your neighborhood, or have you seen kids in the neighborhood with hoops?
In another neighborhood, further down, they had hoops, but we didn't have hoops.
Okay. When the boy or the girl were by themselves and they had a ball, what do you think that they were doing when they were shooting at the hoop? What was going through their mind?
Just basically pretending as if they're some superstar and
absolutely. Yeah. And they take shots on the basket, and their brain is going to, I'm so-and-so, and I just finished shooting and winning the game. And a friend shows up. In most cases, what did those kids play first?
One-on-one or shoots. Probably shoot, just shooting.
Just shooting. They would play games here in the United States called horse, Horse, or some kind of a game, right? Who taught them how to play that game, horse?
They probably just made it up.
Some other kids did. The older kids taught the younger ones how to play those games.
Yes.
And pretty soon, as more kids showed up, now you played, 2-on-2 and whatever the numbers were. But the bottom line is, it was older children that taught us how to play the game. It wasn't an adult, because I just don't think adults know how to communicate with kids. But older kids can communicate, they can still relate to how they learned that particular game.
It's funny you say that, because I work with a couple of 12 and 13-year-olds, and in order for me to keep them attentive for an hour in trying to get them what I need to do, the highlight of the whole thing really is not me working with them. The highlight of the whole thing is we play mini sticks. Or we invented a game called the ball game. And the idea is that if it goes by you, and there's a certain, we create our boundaries. We say, okay, this is how high you can throw it. And the kids love that so much more than me working with them. It's almost like, and the parents get a kick out of it, because I'm a bit of a kid, go figure. I'm a bit of a kid myself, and I love playing with kids. I just love playing with kids, because I think it's just, and I let them, I don't put rules. I just say, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want? Okay, we'll make the rules as we go. And they pretty much make the rules. And for the most part, I find a lot of times it's quite fair, actually. Some of them are a little bit competitive. I have this one little 12-year-old girl I work with. She's super competitive. She hates to lose, but but in the end, it's every week. It's like, it's a new game. And she loves, her dad told me, she likes coming to see you, but she loves the game. Go figure.
Well, that's just it, though. Go figure. The problem that we have, or at least the way I look at it, is the kids enjoyed playing those kind of fun games that they create. My question always is, does it relate to the game that they're going to play on Saturday?
Probably not.
Okay, so now we get the adults involved again, right? And what they do is they, like in soccer, they'll play, like Simon says, sharks and minnows, bumper cars and all these kinds of things. And my question is, How many of those children around the world get together and play Simon Says, Sharks and Minnows, and all these other games versus playing soccer 1 against 1, 2 on 2, 3 on 3? The kids play the games that they're familiar with. They don't play the adult games. They play the children's games like you just mentioned. And I'm sure the kids, like your 12-year-old, she'll go and organize a game with other 12-year-olds later on to play it because they enjoy it. And if the skills relate to back to the game that they're going to play on Saturday, you've got it made. But our kids, they play Simon Says, Sharks and Minnows and all these things. And then on Saturday, we have to yell and scream at them to play soccer.
Well, one of the things I noticed is that so part of this ball game that we invented was if the ball goes by you, you get a point, right? And so you have to have very good reaction time. Mm-hmm. And we play with a small, like a sponge ball, so you can whip it really hard, and it goes by. And sometimes it, the idea here is that they have to react really quickly to that. And it's funny that one of the parents kind of off the cuff made a comment saying, his ability to react to pucks and stuff like that has really increased now because, and she thinks it's because of the game that we played. I think, well, yeah, because you're having fun while you're doing it. You don't even realize you're playing. I mean, you don't even realize you're doing what you're doing because it's play. It's the whole idea. And I think this is a really, I think is a really missed sort of aspect of working with children. And I think maybe I can, part of the world in Canada, compared to, let's say, in other parts, maybe, I don't know, but this idea is just letting them play, just give them a few rules, but not too many. And they will make things up on their own. And by and large, they will make things up that's fair. And then the week after, they'll come back and do something else. And it's like, it's just basically a bunch of neighborhood kids is getting together, and the parents is like, crack of, when the sun starts coming down, basically, oh, Billy, come home now, but prior to that, the parents were not even involved completely. There was like, they were doing their thing, the kids are doing their thing. So that was the beauty of that. And I think now it has to be almost sort of formalized, which is sad, but it's true.
Well, like I said earlier, you need to teach the children how to lay out the environment and start playing on their own. So in our case, it's laying out a soccer field. When they have the ball, they're an attacker. When they don't have the ball, they're a defender. And hopefully after, so many years, they actually learn that once you lose the ball, you have to gain it back again. Once you have the ball, make sure you try to score.
Right. And I like watching little kids play soccer because it's like a beehive around the queen bee kind of thing. It's like wherever the ball is, everybody.
Well, one of the things that I try to teach also is that adults need to realize that the key to teaching children is to make hard work seem or look like fun.
Play. Yeah.
And in order to do that, what you have to do, no matter what you do in their practice session, is always include the ball. And I don't care if you're working on stretching, you should have a ball. I don't care if you're working on physical fitness, you should have a ball. And ask yourself the question, does it happen in the game? If the answer is yes, then practice it. If it won't happen in the game, then don't practice it. A couple of examples. How often do you think you'll have a player standing still with another player behind him, another one behind him, another one behind him in the middle of the game? The whistle's blown, the game starts, and those players stand in a straight line. How often will that happen in the game?
Pretty rare.
So why do we practice it?
Because we as adults think we should do that.
Well, because we think we've got control of those kids.
Yeah.
Right? It's, I'm the leader and you need to follow my instructions, so stand in line. How do you know what's going through that child's brain at the time that they're standing there looking at the back of somebody else's head?
Exactly.
And then coaches can't figure out why the kids are stepping out of line, and you've got discipline problems because they're hitting each other. I mean, not now because we have social distancing, but once they're closer together, kids have a tendency to figure out, is that shirt made out of polyethylene or cotton or whatever? The other kid, so you have discipline problems. The other thing, how often are you going to find a child, once the game starts, the whistle blows, the game is going, and they start running around the field?
Yeah,
around the field, not in the field.
Yeah, it's rare.
And yet we have coaches have the kids running laps. Or how often can you call all the kids together in the middle of a game, call them all together and start talking to them?
Yeah, exactly.
Can't do that. So
yeah.
Why do we have them do laps, lecture to them, and also standing in line? Figure out what is it that they need to do in the game, take the ball to it, and make their mind get away from the fact that they're doing like stretching or anything else like that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I have a policy with in terms of who I work with. I won't work with kids under 12 years old.
Coward.
Oh no, just because in the gym environment, what I do, right, is basically it's too formal, and they don't have the. I said, you know what? You're best just putting them on different sports. Just make them play. Just say, why do you have to throw out a medicine ball? Is not normal for a kid. I'm sorry. And truth be told, there's certain levels of development that has to occur still. In an informal gym environment, there's a lot of safety hazards and stuff like that. So if you don't have that kind of attention, it's also a hazard for me and them. And so I've had parents come to me, 8-year-old kid. I'm like, well, make them play soccer, make them go play different sports every summer, like every couple of months, put them in a different sport, right? And again, that could be a problem too, as you're saying right now, because they formalize it too much too, right? But they need to just play different elements of skill development, and they develop these different motor patterns. And according to Dr. Karl Dewazien, those motor patterns are used later on for cognitive thinking. So the more exposure you can get to a child in terms of different movements, and this brings me to this idea of like what I consider like the base sports in working with kids. One of them would be track and field. Because in track and field, they learn coordination, reaction time, jumping, running, throwing, endurance, anaerobic, so running, like mobility, flexibility, and then gymnastics. Obviously, learn coordination again, using their own body weight, strength, isometric work. They use coordination. How do they move their body and balance? And then you have swimming again, which is now in a different medium. So you learn coordination, breathing, and then obviously a skill sport, either soccer, because you learn to kick, use your feet, a basketball with your hands, baseball, football, because you run and catch sort of thing. We try to, so some of those sports are kind of, but just not in a formal sense, in one sense, but just informally exposure to those elements up until, let's say, 12, 13, 14, at which point then you start to, maybe specialize based on what they prefer. And this is a really interesting point, because one of my profs, Dr. Bapa, he was director of coaching in Romania, and they, back in the 70s, I mean, you had gymnasts that were 18 years old. I remember Olga Corbett, at 18 years old, you couldn't really do some of the stuff the kids now are doing at the international level, because they're just like, they're so tiny and they can flip, all that kind of stuff. So the age standard for some of the sports of entry was much higher later in the 70s than it is now. So they're trying to push this back. The problem is, the other problem I find is the physical development, let alone the mental development, but the physicality hasn't quite developed properly to want to formalize that particular sport at that age. I see 12-year-old kids now, with back problems, and I can't remember ever having a colleague at the youth level having, maybe scrapes and stuff like that. You fall, but nobody I knew had a back problem, or shoulder problem, or an elbow problem from throwing too many pitches. It was just something that you never heard about.
Well, to go back another step, you're talking about the equipment inside the gym that you're using. I'm sure that it's not made for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds. And to go back in the 80s, I was very criticized over something that I tried to get across and eventually did. Actually, with Bill Thompson, one of the Canadian national coaches, we started working and looking at the younger kids, and we found that them playing on an adult field, 110 yards long with a goal that's 8 feet high,
Oh,
and they're 6 and 7 years old. It's like they couldn't even see the other side of the field. But you had to play the game. If not, you were anti-American or anti-sport or anti-soccer. So we came across, and I actually wrote and published the modified laws of the game, saying that smaller children should be on smaller fields with smaller equipment, with smaller numbers and all that kind of stuff. It's called Modified Laws of the Game. Copyrighted 1980. 2017, the U.S. Soccer Federation mandated that those laws actually become national law. Over 35 years to get the equipment to actually fit the children's size and mental capabilities and everything else that goes along with younger kids.
So you would be considered a paradigm shifter then?
I was considered an outlier.
I would consider you a paradigm shifter. And what I mean by a paradigm shifter is one person. Initially, when they first come in, they have an idea, a concept, and everybody thinks they're crazy, right? Fast forward 5-10 years later, like, oh my God, this guy's a genius.
Well, I'm not a genius. I'm still considered an outlier because I focus on the development of the child rather than on the development of a soccer player.
I have a book, a very old book on training tennis the Czech way. And it's funny how, I'm surprised, like our own tennis association hasn't adopted it, but they actually had smaller courts and they had smaller rackets, smaller ball, smaller net. And then as the child progressed, they would, able to cover the court more. But because of the smaller sport, the court, they had to use their reaction time much better as opposed to the physical element of running back and forth. And so when they got later on to the bigger courts, it was much easier for them to make that transition of, with reaction time. And this is one of the things you develop as children. You can't really develop them physically, but you can definitely develop their ability, their cognitive ability, and their ability to sense implements and, coming at them or something like that. And I think this is, one of the things that some of the sports over here, I know tennis for one of them. I'm not sure basketball, but
Yusuf, I don't mean to stop you on that one because you mentioned one that I've been looking at for years also, and that is basketball. At one time, all the baskets were 10 feet high. Okay, right. So now all of a sudden somebody was smart enough to start shrinking the basket down, but they were still using the big ball, and the kids still couldn't shoot it. So now they've got smaller ball, lower baskets, and the kids can work on the techniques that some of these professionals do.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where you try to scale things down to their size, develop, and this you formalize in doing so. And correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to formalize the idea of play. You're going to foster more play aspect of it than having to deal with any outside elements that are controlling the play. Right?
Yes. The other thing that's involved, obviously, also is, will they stick to it if they're a failure at it, or will they stick to it if they're successful at it? And I'll use basketball as an example. If you're shooting at a 10-foot basket and you can't reach it, eventually you're going to go, why should I try? And they walk away from the game. Right. But if the basket was brought down and they could do some of the things that you remember, again, they use their imagination and they copy, some hero that they have. If they can do it and they're successful at it, then they'll continue building on it. And this is what you need to do in my sport in soccer. We need to make sure that the child is successful at it. Yeah. But also need to create good habits.
I remember playing basketball. This is a little off the side here, but you're talking about this play aspect here. I played in doing my physical education degree. I had to play different sports. We had to have activity credits, and so one of them was basketball. And I used to get in trouble a lot for this because I used to do the Jabbar skyhook.
Oh yeah.
And I used to get the ball sometimes, and we would play a game, and I'm like, Jabbar with the skyhook, right? And I think once or twice I maybe hit it, but the coach would always like, Omar, stop it. You're not Jabbar. I'm like, yeah, but I'm pretending to be one.
Well, It's the same. I'm sure every once in a while, if you've ever played golf, you've got one lousy game and you get to the last hole and you sink a putt and you're all excited to come back again.
Yeah, it's so
You
crazy.
have to have success before you'll continue doing it.
Yeah, for me it was just complete fun because I think the coach was a little bit serious. Like he thought, like listen, these guys are not NBA material or any sort of league material. It's a bunch. We're trying to get a credit here, so let's have some fun here while we're doing it. And if we score a couple of points, we lose a couple. In the end, you walk away and everybody's like happy. So, but anyways, we digress here in terms of my upbringing here. But I wanted to talk to you about you know, uh, at what age do you work with? Like what age do you do? So do you implement your programming into different like sort of leagues, or is it the league, or you are a league yourself?
What I do now is I try to convince adults and I try to work with coaches because I figure if I can reach one coach with this idea of the children going through a specific routine, that they're going to enjoy the game. And that routine is applicable from U6s all the way through professional sports. So I try to convince the adults on teaching the players how to play that game by themselves.
Okay. And at what age you implement your program? So you get the coaches involved, or the parents involved, and then they implement your advice, if I'm not mistaken, and how they should then formalize their ability to work with the kids that they work with. Correct?
Absolutely. If the coaches have to work with the parents, I mean, it's just like school. You have the work at practice, then you have to go home, you have to do your homework. It's the same as far as I'm concerned as sport is in soccer. The child goes to practice, they should go home and they learn more on their own than they can at a practice session because the coach has to look at all the players. We don't know, we can't focus on the individual, so now the parent has to get involved. And I'll just give you one example. Have you ever seen a father and a child play soccer against each other?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. Who dominates the ball?
More often not the dad.
Bottom line is the kid never touches the ball and the father's got the ball the whole time. You need to teach the adult that the child needs to touch the ball, and what you do is you just, give playful defense, but you don't take the ball away from the child. Again, they need to be successful and they need to be able to score goals. And I just showed you how to lay out that environment. You've got one goal, I've got another one. Let the child score. But instead, dad has the ball and scores all the time. And now the kid goes, well, I can't play this game. Becomes a teenager, they quit.
Yep. And I guess slide tackling would be out of the question too, right? So I want your opinion on this thing here. And I feel like coaches, to me, are sometimes surrogate parents. And the experience they have with the coach often reinforces or negates, one of the two, the experience they have with the parent. And I think sometimes coaches forget I work with kids right now, and I work with this one young man. He's 14. I call him a man now. He's 14. But some of our sessions are a little bit longer than usual because I'm sometimes imparting information or values that the parent has been trying to reinforce. And parents and kids and teenagers, it is what it is. But sometimes they need to hear. To sum it up, it takes a village to raise a child, and I think sometimes coaches need to sort of. It's a dicey role. I know it's not, but the idea is like, cleaning your room, for example. Hey, did you just simple things like making your bed? Now, I found out one of my athletes was not making his bed. I said, you know what? You better make your bed. I was like, I'm sorry, you don't come back. You gotta make your bed. And the kid respects me enough that the parent told me, that was kind of nice. I was firm but fair. I said, it's very important that you make your bed. And the parent told me the week after, says, he's starting to make his bed. Or one time I remember the child came in and they were a bit, sort of iffy, whatever. And I stopped I stopped the session halfway and I said, you know what, we're done. We're done today. I said, you know what? You need to apologize to your mother because your mother drove you all the way from here. And then I'll take my apology second. You need to apologize to your mother first. She drove you, she woke up early, she did all this, she got your stuff ready, right? She got your breakfast, whatever. And the least you could do is show up here with a good attitude. And so next week, I want you coming back and I want you better with today. And upon leaving, the mother's like, she's going like, thank you, So sometimes, I'm fair. I always tell the kids, you don't have to like me, you just have to respect me. But if you like me, that's a bonus.
Well, Yusuf, it's one of the concerns that I really have nowadays, because what you said is having a coach being, an extra parent type of individual. Nowadays, I find an awful lot of coaches, their livelihood depends on the kids doing well.
Yes.
And it's paid coaches that are looking for wins and losses rather than the development of the child.
I agree.
And what they do, I call it a meat market. This child's not good enough, so they put him on the bench or they cut him and another one comes in. And to me, that is a big concern because we, as you said, coaches, and maybe that's something that I should mention, is I think I became an instructor of adults because when I was a teacher, children were forced to be with me. Okay?
Yes.
The law said you have to be in this classroom, and now you had children that maybe liked me, that weren't maybe not too thrilled about me, and children that didn't like me, but they were forced to be with me for a whole year. And I found that I couldn't reach the ones that were forced to be with me. But in sports, the child hopefully makes the decision that they want to be part of the team. So the end result is that they're coming to me with an interest, and I can affect them in the areas that you talked about, especially in discipline and manners and all these type of things. And I think that like the paid coaches, a lot of them, they do a lot of teams. Well, you need to get to know the individuals. And if you've got a team of 18 players, to have 18 different personalities is very difficult, let alone having 36 and 42 and all the numbers that these guys coach. So I think it's very important to have individuals, like you said, who actually can focus on the players, get to know them as individuals before you even start coaching them as a team. And rather than, like you said, rather than telling the child what they need to do, like clean your room and do this and do that, ask them why they're not cleaning their room. Find out from them. Ask them, guided questions to find out from them why they're doing things the way that they are. And then hopefully they can come up with the correct answer rather than you telling them. Because I have a problem with adults telling a child and assuming that they understand exactly what you're trying to get across.
Yeah, exactly. And the big thing for me with that one child was the idea of discipline. And it starts off, and I reinforced it because there's a YouTube video of a naval captain or naval admiral. And the first thing he said, you got to make your bed.
There you go.
So yeah. I sent that to the parent. I said, you might want to show him this one. But it starts off with that. These small little things add up, all these small things. And I try to live as best I can to give them an example. When they show up, I'm on time. I have things prepared. I take some time, we don't just kind of go right into the workout. I kind of ask them how their week was to get an idea of what, their mood, and also if they're tired this week, all these things sort of give you an indication of what you can do for that day. And so it's really important that you get to know the athlete. Like you said, the personality. Every athlete has there's a personality behind that number. And if you get to know that personality, then you need to coach the personality, not the sport.
Exactly.
If I could sum it up.
Exactly. Well, also to go back to a practice session, to me, the practice session should try to get as close as possible to what you're going to do on game day. So what you just finished saying, like be on time. Well, if the game starts at, say, 10 o'clock and you ask the parents to bring the child to that practice at 9:30, that means that practice has to be exactly the same. In other words, bring your child to practice a half an hour before we actually get started. And
Yes.
then the practice itself, because everybody asks me, well, how long should I practice? Well, the players, as far as I'm concerned, should be as active in practice as they are during the game. So if the game is 60 minutes long, well, your practice should be 60 minutes long, and hopefully they're as active during that practice as they are during the game. Okay,
Yeah.
so if the ball is moving and the players are moving, learning is taking place. Once the ball stops and the player stops, learning stops. And
Right.
if coaches can get used to that idea, practice starts here and it ends there. And what do you do then? Well, again, you need to get as close as possible to game day situation.
Right. So, Coach Karl, give me an experience. I mean, obviously you played soccer, and I know you played at a high level, right? But growing up yourself, what was that like? Was that similar to what you're? Is it something of similar ilk, or is it something that you sort of, what, this is what's missing, and you kind of form the fundamental program? Is that how it worked for you? How did it work?
Well, here's a story, and I'm sorry I'm going to be telling a long one because
Ed.
my mother was Polish and she was in 3 Nazi concentration camps. My father was Lithuanian and he was in a Russian and then a Nazi concentration camp. So I was born and raised in Germany as a Flüchtling, which means a little bit lower than dirt. And I don't remember my childhood. I don't remember if I played soccer when I was a child or not. So when I came to the United States, fortunately, I had pretty good sports abilities, and I played American football, basketball, baseball. I played all the sports until I was recruited because I was a field goal kicker, and one of my friends was the fastest track runner in the United States in a certain distance. He was going to a small private college, and he said, I wanted to go in the service, fight in Vietnam and all those kinds of things. But he said, no, let's go chase girls. So he went to the athletic director and he said, I want my friend to get a scholarship to come to school here. So I met with the athletic director and he says, too short for basketball, too lazy to run track. We don't have a good tennis team. How about, and it's the first time I heard the word, he said, how about soccer? So here I was about 18, 19 years old. He handed me a book and he said, here's the ball, here's the book, read it and try to learn it. My father had a turkey ranch at the time. So the first chapter was on juggling the ball, keeping it up in the air. And in the bedroom, I'm knocking everything down. And my mom, she says, no more juggling of a soccer ball in the house. And my goal was always to do one more juggle than the day before. So if I did 1 or 2, I stayed in the bedroom until I get 3. And then I got 4. And then I hit the lights or something. And so it was out to the turkey ranch. I went out there and I juggled. And it was about maybe a week later. It was one of those phenomenal things, things just went right. And I juggled and the ball wouldn't hit the ground for maybe 100 touches.
Wow.
Yes, that's what I said. So as the ball hit, I yelled, yes, wow. 75,000 turkeys gobbled back at me, and I figured this is my sport.
Maybe the turkeys are not too far from the soccer fans. I don't know. I've
So
seen soccer fans around the world. They're not too far off.
there you go. So now to get back to the college, within the 3rd year, I became the player coach for the team. So
Okay.
I must have played it as a child, but I don't remember. And, I picked it up very, very quickly. And what I do now is, because I can't remember my childhood, I want children to have one. And we treat the children, in my opinion, as mini professional adults rather than giving them a chance to be a child and play the games.
Wow. That's a lovely story. Seriously.
Thank you.
That's a tearjerker too. I think I remember, it kind of brings me with a story with a gentleman. I remember he played for the Toronto Maple Leafs, his local professional hockey team here. His name was Lou Franceschetti. And I remember meeting him one time, and I asked him, how'd you get started in hockey? He said, I never played hockey. He said, my real sport was soccer. In fact, he got a scholarship. He got a scholarship, I think, to Miami of Ohio, which is kind of boggles my mind for soccer. Like, why would you want to go to play, cold climate? But anyways, he was there, but he knew a lot of the guys on the hockey team, and so sometimes the guys used to just get together and play some shinny. And one day he was playing, and the coach happened to pop in to see what the guys were up to, and here's this guy, doing moves and wheeling around. He said, "Who is that kid?" You say, "Well, that's Lou Franceschetti. He plays soccer. Soccer. That's it." You tell him, you say, you tell him when the fall time comes around, you're trying out for hockey. That's how he did. He ended up playing college hockey. Made the switch from soccer to hockey, and then I think a year later he got drafted by the Leafs. So here's I mean, I keep telling that story to some parents. I'm saying, it's you, and he used a lot of his soccer skills because, when you sometimes your stick is tied up. Well, you got to use your skates to kind of push the puck along, and so he was very good at both. I guess he was able to do some stuff with the skates that the other players couldn't do, and so he was able to finagle his way around the defense. Just by using his footwork.
Mm-hmm. Well, all you need to do is take a look at some of the best basketball players, or any other sport, actually, and most of them have played soccer in their background. Why? Because you're working on eye-foot coordination, where almost all the other sports are eye-hand coordination. So if somebody, as a child, plays soccer, they're going to be good in any sport.
And it's funny you say that, because from a little bit aside here, but one of the things I do is I took a course in I do structural body work, and so we work on posture. And one of the key things in posture is you have to get the foot working. And when you get the foot working, the expression is you have to be able to see with your feet and feel with your eyes. And so when you learn touch and bare feet, for example, especially if you play soccer with barefoot, you learn the sensitivity of touch, and you learn how to control the ball, because and you also learn a lot about balance, because you're right. At any one point you're sort of on one leg, so to speak. But so it's really interesting you bring that up, because there's a lot of transference from a motor perspective into the postural system by using your foot to play in a game or so, and that allows you sort of those sort of variables that in some ways that you wouldn't have to formally now somewhat take that into account when I work with people, exactly retrain the foot. Mm-hmm. And one of my ideas is to bring like a Nerf soccer ball, and just kind of spend 5 minutes or so just kicking the ball back and forth with them, and they learn to kick with the opposite foot as well. Not from a perspective of learning how to be a better player, but just the idea of getting that motor memory from the brain to the foot established, so it becomes more of a spinal loop, reflexive movement, as opposed to something where as soon as they go on one leg, they have a hard time sort of figure out where they are in space. I mean, I just look at, for example, Lionel Messi. When I remember the first time I saw highlights of him, I'm thinking that guy runs with the ball as fast as some people without the ball. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, wow, I've never seen anybody do that before, that speed. And let alone the ability to control the ball at that speed, which is unbelievable. And which is, again, back to this idea of developing this whole, making sure the body is functioning properly, right? And so this comes back to where, if you spend time with the children, learning how to kick the ball, use the ball, et cetera, that, I think, over time transfers. And going back to the story of Lou Franceschetti, all this stuff transfers. It's incredible, and it's somewhat organic, but it's somewhat formalized as well, as you do it with your program, mm-hmm. Right? So I find that really interesting.
Well, Yusuf, one of the things that I really try to get coaches to do is to get that eye-foot coordination built much better is figure eights. So going back to laying out the goal, go to the right side, put down the cone, go to the left side, put down the cone. That distance would be a distance for me to work on the figure eight. So now I dribble around this cone, and more than likely, which foot do you think I'll be using here if I go around this cone here?
On the outside foot, the outside foot.
Yeah, and then if I go around this cone, which foot would I be using?
The other foot, yeah.
Okay, so naturally, I'm not telling a player to work with their weaker foot, but if you start a young child going in figure eights and then using the different foot parts, instep, sole, and all of those kinds of things, going sideways, going backwards around the figure eight, they'll do it again in a fun environment, and it's hard work because they're working on their weak foot, and eventually we hope, or I hope, they won't know if they have a strong or a weak foot because they're so used to doing this, in the routine that eventually they're both legged. I don't know if you call it that. Multi-legged. Huh?
That story reminds me of Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi, clean my car, wax on, and it's like, he's like, after a while, he's like, all I did was clean your cars, and it's like, he goes, Daniel-san, wax on, wax on.
Exactly.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's a really good point there, because, and this is where, again, I go back to the name of your fundamental. It's fun. They don't even realize they're doing it. It's fun, right? And
yes.
I'm sure you have tons of drills like that.
Now, wait, stop right there.
Go ahead.
Don't ever use the word drill around me.
Okay. All right. No problem.
Never. If I ever hear it again, I'll hang up on you, because children, and well, let me ask you as an adult, if I told you, all right, let's do this drill, how would you feel about doing it?
It's the challenge or something.
Yes. It's a negative, right? And that's what we do. We tell them, okay, let's do this drill. And the kids, after a little while, man, I'm sick and tired of doing these drills.
Right.
Everything in my curriculum is a game.
I get it. Yeah. I can see that. Yes. How you and NLP, neuro linguistic programming, how you phrase things really then sets the tone on how that person is going to absorb that thing. And very, very good point. Very good point. So, what do you see typically? Your program right now is implemented in how many soccer leagues right now?
It's up to the individual to make the decision, because, like I said earlier, the curriculum is set up in such a way that I don't care who runs a practice session, they're already doing it, but they're not doing it consciously. Because I found that when a person goes to practice, what they do is they constantly seem to make adjustments. They see something on YouTube and they go, this might fit in here, or that might fit in here. And they don't realize that if the child doesn't know what to expect, then you have to teach them. Well, as you're teaching them, they don't get a chance to play.
So the games that you play, I'm sure you have a whole bunch of these different games that you sort of worked out now.
No, they're real simple. Real simple. Play games 1 against 1.
Right.
In small groups.
Okay.
In larger groups, and the team. So you play individual to scrimmage. But the adjustment is made according to the skill level of the players.
Right. And so how many leagues right now in California, or do you have it across the United States, like your programming?
Well, I have people that are actually asking me questions internationally, because you're in Canada. That's international for me.
Okay. Yes.
And I have been in Toronto, where I did some cleaning, some sessions with Dick Howard and John De Benedictis.
Okay. Yeah. John's on my LinkedIn. I've been trying to get a hold of him. I work, kind of a little, I don't want to use this time to kind of promote me, but I kind of work in this gray area between speed development and regeneration. So I try to get the athletes faster. Guys, I try to bring back guys from the brink. Sometimes they've been injured a lot of times, and they develop different distortion patterns that are kind of preventing them from accessing what we call free flow. And so anyways, I tried to link up with John, and anyways, that's a long story, but that's how that's how I know him. And that's, I think, through that contact I met you. So yeah, and we chatted a while back. I remember, and I think, you know what, I got to get my podcast set up so I can get half the guy, because I would love to. Like I said, I always believed in long term. I did a paper many moons ago on long term planning for children, and very similar to what I just told you. You don't do anything formal with them until basically 13, 14 years old. They start to develop the cognitive abilities so you can actually deal with them. But prior to that, it's all about games and play. Make everything a game. Don't make it too formalized. Because the mind at that age doesn't learn that. And when you make it, you have a high degree of imagination. And so we need to propagate that, because really, in the end, when you have a lot of imagination, over time, you get to think, when you get into an adult, you get this idea of creating. You can create a broader paradigm. You can think abstract thought, which is really, I think, something that's missing in school, is the ability to think abstractly, because a lot of concepts come from abstract thought, and you need to foster that through movement with a child, not through sit down and learn, because the brain is not wired that way. According to Dr. Karl Dewazien as well, the brain is hardwired for movement. And as you give movement patterns over time, that actually transfers into the cognition. And this is something, this is why I think, at least I can attest over here, because one of my clients is a principal, and he says when they started taking away recess, they had to give more, kids had to, it's sad. Some of the kids would go batty, and they'd say, well, the kid's ADD. And so they have to go on Ritalin. And so now and I don't want to go down that road, but basically you take it, all they had to do is just implement recess twice a day. But the problem was, you see, they got to a point where you can't even play tag now, because it's a liability. And I blame the parents. I don't blame this association, because we had gymnastics. We had our teachers are never qualified instructors. I mean, we're surprised we probably didn't bring next. But all they had to do, in one sense, was bring in formal instructors, in one sense, to teach that stuff, like they did in Eastern Bloc countries. From what I know, from Dr. Bump was telling me, they used to have formal coaches come in there, and they would work with the children at that level, but they had formal coaches, as opposed to a teacher taking a weekend course, and they don't know how to spot. They don't know. And so you had probably one or two liability cases. And next thing you know, it's got to the point where, okay, now the kids are not, getting they can't play sport. They're not getting injured, but they have other, you close one door, open up another one, basically.
Well, it goes back to what I said earlier, isn't it? You need to teach the teachers how to teach the kids, and then the kids teach each other.
Yeah.
Instead of having an expert come in for a couple of hours, what you need is for that individual to teach that adult how to do it correctly. Then the adult has to make sure that they allow the child to learn how to do it themselves.
Right.
To get back to the curriculum, you asked, who's using it. It's there is no such thing as anybody having a perfect curriculum. All you can do is give them a framework, and then what the coach has to do is adjust that framework according to the skill level and the interest and the motivation of the players. And maybe one of these days we can do another podcast and we'll go through the 9-step routine.
I'd love that. Again, I have to bring I want to do that. I want to also bring another gentleman as well. Maybe maybe have a three-way conversation if possible. Kind of bring it, because he was a gold medalist, and I'm sure with the three of us we'll probably have an entertaining conversation. But yeah, I'd like, again, Coach Karl, I really appreciate your time for taking the time out. I know you're a busy man, and it's kind of one of my things that's close to me, is working with kids and making sure they have fun. And I think I see that they've sort of lost that element. Some coaches get it, some coaches don't get it, some parents don't get it. And when a child has fun, it's amazing what good things can come from it. But if they don't have fun, you'll just burn them out. I think in very young age, they just won't play anymore. They'll lose a love for physical activity.
Well, the dropout rate here in the United States between ages 10 through 14 is 75% in all sports.
Oh my God. Wow.
And to me, I think that is really horrendous. Besides that, we have obesity problems with the kids not being active. And unless we get them into being active, and I don't care what sport it is,
yes,
we're going to have a huge problem. And I just hope that what we can do is motivate the adults to allow the kids to play. So in order that for the child to actually enjoy doing what they're doing, so they'll do it for a lifetime.
So, Coach Karl, where can parents get a hold of you, or coaches get a hold of you to implement some of your program?
3 W's, fundamentalsoccer.com.
Okay. And
3 W's, fundamentalsoccer.com is the website, and all they have to do is just drop a note, and I'll be back to them as soon as I can.
Okay. Do you have like a subscription, like a email newsletter?
All freebies.
Okay. All right.
We're going to change that one of these days, though, because everybody's making money except guys like me.
Trust me, I'm in the same boat. I think technically, we're about the same on par there. I have to ask my computer guy to show me how to use Skype here. So
he did a good job because we finally connected.
So yeah, I appreciate it. I'll definitely have to call you back probably in a month's time. And I want you to kind of take more of the floor and basically go through those 9 steps if you don't mind sharing with the audience, right?
Absolutely not.
Perfect. And so we'll be in touch. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Coach Karl.
Joseph, any time that I know that it's going to benefit the kids, I'll give the time for it. So please, whatever I can do, let me know.
Oh, appreciate it. Oh, I'll definitely, same here. If I can help you out any way, let me know.
Very good. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Take care. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.